everybody. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Talk to Me Tuesdays. It's Tajah, the Mindset Coach. Tonight I'm joined with a lovely group of ladies, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Alieya, and I'm happy to be here.
I am Arlissa Pinkelton. I again thank you so much for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm Kesha Fuller. Thank you so much for the invite. And I look forward to this evening with you ladies.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So tonight is about don't shrink yourself. So, ladies, let me ask you, have you ever had moments in your life, whether it be relationships, with a spouse, a friend, or it can even be in your working environment, where you felt like you had to shrink yourself, not be so proud or not be the real you? We have that a lot of ways, whether you're not going to wear your natural hair, maybe you're going to get it processed, maybe you don't want to really talk the way you talk, where you can't be real, any form of that. Have you ever experienced that? Let's talk about it. What about you, Aliyah?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had to really think hard about this, and I thought of a time when I was about 22, and I was working. It was an employment situation, and I was working for Chrysler at the time. And being 22, I was making six figures. I was living in Idaho, and my husband and I had an opportunity where I could go on and get a promotion and continue working the job I was working. But I just really didn't like the job at all. Hated the job, really tired. It was putting a strain on our marriage, and we really just wanted to start a family and wanted to settle down and relax. And my job was causing me just to work so much, so many hours, and travel so much. And so it got to the point where it was either the job or it was going to be the marriage, one of the two. And it just was to the point where everyone in my family was like, you need to keep your job, take the promotion. Even my husband was like, okay, keep the job. Mm-hmm. And so when they offered me the position, I said yes. I didn't want to, but I said yes because it was so much money and it's what I went to school for. And it's like, continue on.
Right.
And as soon as I told my boss, yes, I'll take the job, it was like this pit in the bottom of my stomach where I knew I made the wrong decision. And after I hung up the phone, I had no idea how I was going to live with this decision because it made me sick. To the point where I just felt bad. And I got on the phone with my best friend and he told me, he said, okay, so you made a decision. He said, so why can't you just change it? And that was the little piece of advice. I was like, you know what? You can always change your mind.
That's right.
Because I already felt so bad about what I said because I knew that's not what I wanted to do. And I picked up the phone and I called and I told my boss, I said, you know what? I'm putting in my resignation today. And I walked away from that job, that six-figure job, and walked away from Idaho. And that's when we packed up and I moved to Georgia. And my entire family was looking at me like I was crazy. They were like, what are you doing? And the funny thing about it, when I talked to my husband and, we had a conversation because he was like, six-figure income, nice home,
right,
but happiness, and we talked about it. And he's like, you know what? You made the right decision. But in that moment when I said, yes, I'm going to take this position, that was definitely a time where I shrunk myself in that moment because I knew I didn't want that job.
Exactly.
I knew it was so much stress. I knew it was causing problems in the marriage because being away from home so much. But at that brief moment, it was the money and the finances that I was looking at. And after I called and made that decision to change, keeping the promotion and moving forward, it just made everything so much better, And so that was the one time I could really think there was such a huge moment shrinking myself, but it was a pivotal part in my life that's made all the difference. And now we're 20 years into our marriage with 3 children, still in Georgia. And everything is just great,
But first of all, look, because I really know you, I'm going to talk about how you said you called back to resign after you didn't even start the job. That's that's something on itself. But you know what? You brought up a great point that I think a lot of people don't think about as far as shrinking themselves, because you shrink yourselves when you listen to everybody's opinion except your own.
That's right.
When you just live your life because what they think is best for you, right? Or what the right thing to do is, that's shrinking yourself. You have to, you guys always know I say bank on yourself. You got to listen to what's in here and then what's in here. And when you push forward on that, great things will happen in alignment. But we have to discuss that shrinking yourself. So I think that was a great point. And when you learn those kinds of lessons early in life, the greater things are for you the older you get, the more you mature. Okay, Arlissa, what you think?
Well, this is a great question. Honestly, it's a great question. So I've always been a go-getter and a high performer. I fall into that whole alpha female category.
Okay.
No shame, because I ain't nobody's shame. But
Mhm.
I've had several situations where I worked as an engineer, where I was always in environments where I was maybe the only Black woman. I was the younger woman. I've worked in management where I had men, white men tell me, I got socks older than you. And I was like, yeah, but I'm still the boss. I mean, it's
Mhm.
like it doesn't matter. That's like irrelevant, right?
Mhm.
So as I have gone through my career, and I was thinking about the question, the most recent one I can think of, I've been an educator, and after being an engineer for 15 years, I transitioned to become a math educator. And I've taught international math for the last 7 years. So I've gone, to other countries. I've taught in China and
Wow.
Guatemala. And most recently, I was teaching in Bahrain. And I had developed a nice little friend group in
Mhm.
Bahrain where I had, a group of girlfriends. They were all teachers, and everybody, well, probably felt the tug to do, like you said, to bank on myself.
Mhm.
And I decided that this year or last year was my last year teaching. That I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. So did I retire? No, I just said I'm done. I'm done. I'm done doing this. So I decided I was going to bank on myself. I had a business that I was working on. I wasn't, it was like supplemental to my income. And I
Mhm.
decided I was going to put my focus and energy on my business and I traded, changed directions and started to trade stocks. But I'm going to tell y'all, that whole friend group, they dropped me like I was a bad habit. Because yes, it was like, I was shocked because these are people that I consider to be friends,
Mhm.
but when we would get together after I decided I was no longer going to teach, and we would be together, they were having conversations that were basically these conversations of like the continuation of complaints about things that were happening at school and what was wrong with this and what it's kind of, and my mind was, I was all off someplace else. I was talking about, if you're complaining about these things, because I'm very solution oriented. So if you're complaining about this thing, here I was thinking of, ways that you could get out of the situation. And as I started offering solutions or ways that things could be different, nobody wanted to hear that. Nobody wanted to hear that. So it got to where, yeah, I was basically like in situations in social settings where I just was basically sitting letting the time pass, because I'm like,
Mhm.
well, the things I'm interested in talking about or my mind is focused on, because I don't want to just continue to complain about what's wrong at school without a plan on what's going to happen next. And that seemed to be a never ending circle. So I felt like I had to shrink myself in those situations to
Absolutely.
like, pare down and to water down the things I was thinking about. I'm
Right.
thinking, all of us here are making really good money. Why shouldn't we be talking about, investing in stocks and investing? And nobody wanted to talk about that. I was like, well, okay. So then after a while, I got to where I wasn't getting invited anywhere anymore.
Well, that's a good part because at least you didn't have to shrink yourself. And at least you didn't have to shrink yourself anymore. You know what I mean? So sometimes those kind of departures do you a favor because you didn't have to sever it. It just did it itself. And that happens, and that's a good one. That's a really, really good one because there are times in our working environment, especially in Black women, where you have to shrink yourself because you may be the only Black woman or the only Black person at that industry, right? Or in that lane. And yes, even worse when you are in a supervisor role. There are a lot of things that we have to change up. They talk about our hair, our nails, the way you talk. But it's like, but you remember this resume, right? You remember this education, right? You understand? So it's a lot of things in a lot of ways that we do have to shrink ourselves. And like you said, Alieya, what yours was in the corporate setting, but yours was in the friendship setting. So is anybody gonna talk about a relationship, or what you gonna talk about, Kesha?
Well, mine is two parts. Um, the first part was my initial contact with having to shrink myself was high school. I was always put into leadership roles because the teachers saw so much in me that they wanted to pull out of me what they saw in me. And so they were always making me ahead of something, making me organize things. And so I've always been the president of this, the leader of that. And so my friend group did not so much appreciate that. The teachers saw that in me and pulled it out of me. And then I still wanted to be friends with my friends, but they thought that I was better or thought that I was better than everybody else because I did take every role that I was given. I was built for it. So they saw that in me. I started to do things and I was like, hey, Miss So-and-so called me. She asked me if I would speak at the assembly next week. And, oh, really? You know? And so, and I went to, unfortunately, I went to an all Black high school. And that's the time that I saw that's unfortunately, that's where I saw the breakdown of the Black unity. Like, this is where I didn't have with Arlissa the challenges that she had with the counterpart. I had it with us, and it started in high school. So when I went to college, I had culture shock because I didn't go to an all Black college at first. And so that's when I started to develop and get out of the box and didn't have to water myself down. And I was able to blossom in front of people who celebrated me in my face. So it was different. It was different. And then my next point, even on the jobs that I've had and going to college, if I saw something that I was interested in, I wasn't afraid to go after it. And it only came after I had that break between high school and then going to a college. It was a junior college in the beginning. I went to a junior college and it developed me to be able to stand up and say, okay, this is admirable. Now, this is something that you don't need to hide. And so I started to expound on it, and that helped me get further in life with not having to water myself down until this little thing called love decided it wanted to creep into my life.
Whoa.
Speak on it, Kesha. Speak on it. Speak on it.
If I was a boss, and I mean, I'm a boss in my world now. I'm a boss in my world. So I feel like, okay, I met this gentleman that needed some, little help. He was a little rough around the edges. And I felt like, the role that I was in on my job, I could do this and I could do that and I can make this happen. Oh, no, that's no big deal. I can make that happen. And I did everything. But I did not account for people don't treat you the way that you treat them.
That's right.
They don't have they don't see life out of the same lenses as you do.
That's true.
Yeah.
And that was a very tough point for me because now love has set in. And I want you to treat me good. I did all this and I did all that, but it was at the expense of me. And so at the end of the relationship, I had to go back to him. And I apologize because I have a really, really smart mouth. That's just, I really do. I live for it. But when I told him, I said, I apologize to you. He's like, for what, Kesha? I said, you've always shown me who you were. And I held you responsible for what I wanted to see in you.
Oh, come on.
I release you from that. And now I can heal because now I was upset and angry with you for not being who I wanted you to be.
Right.
But you've always shown me who you were.
Right.
I chose to see something different and I held you hostage to that. So now I have to release you. So now I don't have to shrink myself and minimize myself to be with you. And you don't have to walk in false pretenses to be with me.
Mhm.
I release you.
I love that.
So
That's
those
good.
were I've had some smaller time, but those were the most pivotal. Those were the most life-changing. And so now that brings me to who I am today.
I love it. Look, I love the full circle. But yes, we have to be able to identify when we shrink ourselves, because otherwise you stay in that box, you stay in that position. And a lot of times, just like you said, Kesha or Arlissa, in your in your career, and in Alieya, had you taken that job, those people will keep you there because it benefits them when you shrink yourselves for them, right? So you have to be able to recognize it in yourself, say, I don't like it, I don't want to be here, and then make that switch. So now, ladies, since you have made that switch, how are you making sure you stay out of that shrinking yourself box? How are you maneuvering when you get that position, Alieya, that looks great on paper, and then you just like, not gonna do all of that? Or Arlissa, you realizing, we were friends and we were great, and everybody isn't for every season of your life. So now you can move forward and meet new friends that will have your same interests, like in trading stocks and things like that. Not to say you necessarily have to cut them off, but maybe you just don't hang with them or travel with them or do the things that you were doing with them so often. And then Kesha, making sure you're looking at your next potential gentleman and saying, you know what, either you have it, or I can work with this, or you know what, I'm not interested in shrinking myself to make you something that you're not, and maybe that you don't even want to be. So how are you making sure that you don't fall in those boxes again? I'm gonna start back with you, Alieya.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. And I love that because it's so easy now not to do it, because when I walked away from that position, and it sounds so trivial because it was just a position and people look at it that way, but for me it was so much more. It was life changing. And I use that in everything, because I feel like if I could walk away from that, because when I was younger, I used to think, you know what, if they pay me enough, I'm going to do it, because I was about the money back then.
Yeah.
And so when I walked away from six figures at 22, and they moved me all around the country, and I was buying houses and cars and things like that, and it just was not a thing to me. But when I really realized that life was not about the money, and that my happiness was more important, and when I realized that it was about the love that me and my husband had, and having a peace of mind when I went home, and I realized that was what was important, that made all the difference, and that set my life up for a different path. And then the older I got, as the decades went by, then I realized, you know what? It's not about the money, and additionally, but more so now, in addition to my family time, as I really want just time, in addition to the quality of life with my family, I need my time. So, Tajah, question, Tajah, I don't care about any job. You already know that, okay? I have walked away from many, and this is the last one I'm going to work anyway. And it's barely working as it is. So if it doesn't work for me, I'm not working it. And it's just that simple. And it's not the first job I walked away from it. And so, that's not a concern to me. So my main thing is just my time. My time is so important to me, and my experiences, and having a quality of life. And that's just in anything, job wise, friendship wise, all the way around. If it's not quality for me, I don't have time for it.
Yes, I love it. I think I'm gonna have to steal that. She said, if it don't work for me, then I don't work it. There you go.
And then she said, period.
Right. Okay, so look, she is done with shrinking herself, and I love it. Okay, my lady, what about you, Arlissa?
Well, when I made the transition, out of the classroom and decided I was going to, bank on myself, it basically was, I was in a mental space that was, I was in a bad mental space. My mental health was not and I've always been very strong mentally. So this was a rough place for me to be. But I do see, looking back on it now, how the Lord used the situation to really move me to a place that he wanted me to be in. So when I made the decision as it pertains to that job, I also, like, all the areas of my life began to be affected also. So my mental health became a priority and became important to me. So I realized that financially, I could, you know, I had value within myself and I could determine my worth from that point forward. I had been operating a certain way in my marriage. My husband has always followed me for the last 5 or 7 years. He's followed me to these different countries and I was the primary breadwinner. In the midst of this process, I also decided I wasn't doing that no more.
Right.
So I was like, okay, so we getting ready to fix the roles in this relationship.
Right.
You know, I'm going to keep my mental health is now important to me. So basically when one, it was like a snowball. When one thing was affected, all these areas got affected.
Yes.
And I got to where
Yes,
I,
ma'am.
you know, my mom passed away last April. And I'm an only child.
Sorry.
And my mom really worked. Thank y'all. My mom worked really hard to make sure that she could leave an inheritance for me and my children. And what makes me so many times I think, you know, I want to do the things that my mother worked to make sure I could do. I mean, my mother sacrificed my entire life to make sure that I was educated, to make sure that I had the best of the things I could have. I mean, I grew up in a middle class life, so it's not like I, you know, had no silver spoon, but she sacrificed to make sure I had. So I wanted to make sure that after it was all over, that I lived a life. I want to live a life that, you know, is honoring to what my mother did and the sacrifice she gave. And that's all these areas. I'm like, I want my mother to be proud. So I feel like there are all these different areas where I'm 51 years old, which I know is nowhere near old, but I just was like, you know, I'm at the place now where I don't got time for foolishness. I literally don't. So I really don't have time with running my businesses, with being busy and active. I don't have time for a lot of foolishness. So if this is not going, I'm with her. If it don't work for me, I'm not working it, because if it don't go my way, then I just don't have the energy or the time for it. And it's not me. It's really the time where we have to be, I'm having to choose me. It's not, you know, I'm banking on me. I'm choosing me. I'm betting on me. I'm deciding what it is I'm okay with doing and what I'm not okay with doing. And I'm not being selfish, but I am being self-concerned, because you can give yourself away and then you look up like, I gave myself away and nobody even appreciated it.
Exactly.
You know?
And that's why you can't be messing around shrinking yourself, because all those things that you just acknowledge, right? I'm betting on me. I am choosing me, right? Those are things that you can only decide when you're done shrinking yourself, when you're done pleasing everybody, when you're done living for everybody. So Kesha, what about you?
Okay. I would like to say this for me.
Mm-hmm.
When the posture of your heart and your at your core is of service,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
you really have to be intentional and be focused on how to turn that on and off.
Yes, that's good.
Because
that's good.
people's need for you, it don't run out. They always give you some content to bank on. And so when you're helping others, it should never come at the expense of your own happiness. You don't sacrifice to help anybody. And so that's the part where I had to come in and just focus on me. I know that sounds so cliche. I mean, people, and because they water it down, but it's so important, because when you hear people say things, you hear the coaches and you hear the scripts, everybody's focus on yourself, get yourself together. And it sounds great, but that is a real task.
Yes.
That is a real task. And it's hard to do because when you are a postured person of service, you take care of everything around you. And that's how I was. I focused on everything around me. I want to make sure everybody around me is good. And I got what was left until one day there was nothing left.
Oh, wow.
And so I had to then decide, how am I going to replenish myself? And when my focus became to replenish me, then I started having less desire to replenish the people that are around me. If you were not my child or my mom or my grandma, baby, I'll holler at you on the back end, because I got to see about Kesha. And then when I started to do those things and I started to really know who I was, you'll be surprised if you just take a step back and not focus on all the things that are around you. When you really know who you are?
Yeah.
Do you really know what you like? I started feeling different textures. and finding new perfumes and taking longer bubble baths, just the smaller things.
Yeah.
And I really started to develop myself with myself.
Yeah.
And that's what I figured, that my minimization of it was people. It was making sure that everyone was okay around me. And I had to fix that because they were not.
And they will not. And they will not. And that's the biggest thing about, again, shrinking yourself. We can't get away from it because it's almost as if you're pouring from empty cups, right?
Yeah.
Or it reminds me of one time I was doing an interview and the lady was talking about, when you get on the airplane and the flight attendants give their spiel, right? And they say, you put on the mask first. And all of us that are mothers think, no, I got to get my baby first. No, you got to secure you first, right? And as women, especially Black women, we're always giving. We're always nurturing. We're always strong and trying to do everything, right? And I know best because I'm always trying to do everything. To the point that most people know Taj doesn't sleep. And that doesn't stop people from asking me or messaging me in the middle of the night, right? They're going to continue, and I'm okay with that. But at the same time, I now have realized I have to take my breaks, right? I don't need to ask. I need to check in. I just have to take my breaks. So it's sometimes when I come in the house and I just say, you know what, put the phone up. Or I have to shift that meeting or whatever it may be. And recently it has been school where, I've had to say, you know what? I'm taking my own break. They only give me 4 days in this PhD program. That's okay. I'm going to take my own break. And I'm not going to hold myself to living up to the standards I set. Like Kesha, how you talking about that gentleman. Well, we also do that ourselves to ourselves. Oh, yes. And I hold my bar really high. And I had to be able to say and take a step back with Tajah. Hey. Sit down. And that was, my shrinking myself and it was for me. See, we don't also shrink ourselves for other people. Sometimes it's for yourself and you have to check yourself. And I did. And those moments are important because you have to take accountability in shrinking yourself, whether it's with yourself or it's others around you or even that working environment. So, ladies, I just want to say thank you. I think this was an awesome conversation. We talked on so many points. And anyone out there who is experiencing any of this or you feel like you can't figure out how to unshrink yourself, please contact me. I'm Tajah, the Mindset Coach. See you next Tuesday.